Wednesday! Happy Wednesday! I hope you're having a great day today. It is Wednesday, February 24th. It's the 24th day of February. I hope you're having a great day today. We've got a good book to look at. This is called Curious George Rides a Bike. And this is kind of a longer book, so we'll just read this one today. Let's look at it. This is George. He lived with his friend, the man with the yellow hat. He was a good little monkey and always very curious. This morning, George was curious the moment he woke up because he knew it was a special day. Oh, there's George right there. At breakfast, George's friend said, "Today we are going to celebrate because just 3 years ago this day I brought you home with me from the jungle. So tonight I'll take you to the animal show. But first I have a surprise for you." So there's George and the man with the yellow hat. He took George out to the yard where a big box was standing. George was very curious. Ooh, there's the big box. Let's find out what's inside it. Out of the box came a bicycle. George was delighted. That's what he had always wanted. He knew how to ride a bicycle, but he had never had one of his own. Oh, y'all see the bicycle right there? "I must go now," said the man, "but I'll be back in time for the show. Be careful with your new bike and keep close to the house while I'm gone." George could ride very well. He could even do all sorts of tricks. Monkeys are good at that. For instance, he could ride this way with both hands off the handlebar. And he could ride this way like a cowboy on a wild bronco. Oh, how fun. And he could also ride backwards. But after a while, George got tired of doing tricks and okay, let's find out what happens. And went out into the street. Oh no, the newsboy was just passing by with his bag full of papers. "It's a fine bike you have there," he said to George. "How would you like to help me deliver the papers?" He handed George the bag and told him to do one side of the street first and then back and do the other side. George was very proud as he rode off with his bag. So he's delivering newspapers now. He started to deliver the papers on one side of the street, as he had been told. When he came to the last house, he saw a little river in the distance. George was curious. He wanted to know what the river was like. So instead of turning back to deliver the rest of the papers, he just went on. So that's the neighborhood he was delivering papers in, and there he is right there. There was a lot to see at the river. A man was fishing from the bridge, a duck family was paddling downstream, and two boys were playing with their boats. George would have liked to stop and looked at the boats, but he was afraid the boys might find out that he had not delivered all the papers. So he rode on. There's some riding. There's the little river there. While riding along, George kept thinking of boats all the time. It would be such fun to have a boat, but how could he get one? He thought, and then he had an idea. He got off of his bicycle and took a newspaper out of the bag and began to fold it. First, he folded down the corners like this. Ooh, see him folding? Oh, okay. Then he folded both edges up. Let's look at this, how he's doing it. So he folded both edges up. He brought the ends together and flattened it sideways. Okay, let's see. Then he turned one corner up, then the other, and again brought the ends together. This is like the origami we learned about. And finally, he flattened it sidewise. Then gently, he pulled the ends open, and there was his boat. Oh, there's his boat right there. Now the moment had come to launch the boat. Would it float? It did! So George decided to make some more boats. Finally, he had used up all the papers and had made so many boats that he could not count them. A whole fleet. There's George right there with his boats. Watching his fleet sailing down the river, George felt like an admiral. But watching his fleet, he forgot to watch where he was going. Oh no. Suddenly, there was a terrible jolt. The bicycle had hit a rock, and George flew off of his seat, head first. Oh no. Luckily, George was not hurt, but the front wheel of the bicycle was all out of shape, and the tire was blown out. I'm glad he wasn't hurt. George tried to ride the bike, but of course it wouldn't go. So he started carrying it, but it soon got too heavy. George did not know what to do. His new bike was spoiled. The newspapers were gone. He wished he had listened to his friend and kept close to the house. Now he just stood there and cried. Oh, he's upset. Suddenly his face brightened. Why, he had forgotten that he could ride on one wheel. He tried it and it worked. He had hardly started out again when he saw something. Okay, so he's riding on one wheel. Let's find out what he saw. He had never seen before. Rolling towards him came an enormous tractor with huge trailers behind it. Looking out of the trailers were all sorts of animals. To George, it looked like a zoo on wheels. The tractor stopped. Okay. Wow, it looks like a zoo on wheels. And it says, the tractor stopped and two men jumped out. Well, well, said one of them, a little monkey who can ride a bicycle bronco fashion. We could use you in our animal show tonight. I am the director of the show, and this is Bob. So there's the director, and there's Bob. He can straighten your wheel and fix that flat in no time, and then we'll take you along to the place where the show is going to be. So the three of them got into the cab and drove off. Maybe you could play a fanfare while you ride your bike in the show, the director said. I have a bugle for you right here, and later on you'll get a green coat and a cap just like Bob's. They're all inside the truck there. On the show grounds, everyone was busy getting things ready for the show. I must do some work now, said the director. Meanwhile, you have a look around and get acquainted with all of the animals, but you must not feed them, especially the ostrich, because he will eat anything and might get very sick afterwards. Ooh, look at this picture. See all the animals and everything? How fun. George was curious. Would the ostrich really eat anything? He couldn't eat a bugle, or would he? George went a little closer to the cage, and before he knew it, the ostrich had snatched the bugle and tried to swallow it. But a bugle is hard to swallow, even for an ostrich. It got stuck in his throat. Funny sounds came out of the bugle, and the ostrich was struggling with it, all blue in the face. George was frightened. Oh, let's find out what happens. Fortunately, the men had heard the noise and they came rushing to the cage and got the bugle out of the ostrich's throat just in time. Oh, good. I'm glad it was safe. The director was very angry with George. We cannot use little monkeys who don't do as they are told, he says. Of course, you cannot take part in the show now. We will have to send you home. George had to sit on a bench all by himself, and nobody even looked at him. He was terribly sorry for what he had done, but now it was too late. He had spoiled everything. Oh no. Meanwhile, the ostrich, always hungry, had gotten hold of a string dangling near his cage. This happened to be the string which held the door to the cage of the baby bear. As the ostrich nibbled at it, the door opened and the baby bear got out. He ran away as fast as he could and made straight for a high tree near the camp. No one had seen it but George, and George was not supposed to leave his bench. But this was an emergency, so he jumped up, grabbed the bugle, and blew as loud as he could. Then he rushed to his bicycle. The men had heard the alarm and thought at first that George had been naughty again. But when they saw the empty cage and the ostrich nibbling at the string, they knew what had happened. There's George alerting everybody. George raced towards the tree, far ahead of the men. By now, the bear had climbed quite high, and this was dangerous because little bears can climb up a tree easily, but coming down is much harder. They may fall or they might get hurt. The men were worried. They did not know how to get him down safely, but George had a plan. With the bag over his shoulder, he went up the tree as fast as only a monkey can. And when he reached the baby bear, see the baby bear? And there's George rushing up right there. When he reached the baby bear, he put him in his bag and carefully let him down so that the men could safely catch him. Everyone cheered when George had come down from the tree. "You are a brave little monkey," said the director. "You saved the baby bear's life. Now you'll get your coat back, and of course you can ride your bike and play the bugle in the show." So George has a part of the show again. Finally, the show was on. The whole town had come to see it, and how surprised they were to discover George on his bike, right in the middle of it. The newsboy was there too, and also the man with the yellow hat. Oh, it looks like everybody came out, who had been looking for George everywhere. So the man in the yellow hat had been looking for George everywhere and was happy to have found him at last. The newsboy was glad to have his bag again, and the people from the other side of the street, whose papers George had made into boats, were not angry with him anymore. When the time had come for George to say goodbye, the director let him keep the coat and the cap and the bugle, and then George and his friend got into the car. And they went home. That was a great book. The end. That was called Curious George Rides a Bike. Well, I hope you have a great day today, and I'll see you again tomorrow. Bye, friends.